Hello and welcome. It really is my pleasure today to introduce a superstar from the Boston area, Mr. Udit Batra. Udit is the president and CEO of Waters Corporation. Prior to joining Waters, he served as the CEO for MilliporeSigma, and he was the member of the executive board for Merck KGaA, Darmstadt, Germany. He has been awarded for excellence in leadership several times. He has won the CPHI CEO of the Year in 2016, and most recently was the Boston Business Journal Power 50 Mass Bio Ed Leader of the Year. Thank you so much, Udit, for taking the time to meet with us. It's really a pleasure and an honor to have you on Lokvani. Namaste.
Namaskar, Ranjani ji, and thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So exciting to see that in these very special times, you are actually adding to excitement a little bit by going on after a very successful run as CEO of MilliporeSigma. Now you are going to take on at the leadership helm of another very amazing company, Waters. And when I saw that they actually created mass spectrometry and chromatography, that was very exciting for us engineers who have known about these products to see the company that has done it. So, what are I'm just interested to learn more about Waters and what opportunities, what big problems are you looking forward to solving at Waters?
Firstly, thank you for having me again, Ranjani ji, and it's great. It's a great pleasure to see you in a two-dimensional structure. You are still as enthusiastic, and you're coming through the screen just so much. So, look, first thing, just to clarify, I will be joining as the CEO of Waters on September 1st. So I'm not yet on the helm. So I'm trying to learn about the company as much as I can outside in. And as an engineer, I know quite a bit about it and using instruments that Waters has produced. Firstly, MilliporeSigma itself, it's been a blessing. I've been working with Merck KGaA and the Merck family for the last 9 years, starting in consumer health, having a task to turn that business around, and for the last 6.5 years, really the ride of my lifetime. Learning from my colleagues, I'm really blessed. I had great colleagues at MilliporeSigma who taught me a lot along the way. We together made a huge difference, I believe, in the last 6.5 years in reshaping some of that industry, in providing tools and better production equipment for production of vaccines and treatments, and helping people do experiments in labs. But I'm still a work in progress. And so as COVID hit, one thing came home rather quickly. I had been traveling to Germany back and forth almost two times a month for the last 8-9 years. Given the headquarters of MilliporeSigma or Merck KGaA was in Germany, and the COVID time brought a lot of time for reflection, and one gets off the treadmill and starts to reflect. And I felt that finding something closer to home would be great. And it is just an awesome stroke of luck that the board of Waters was looking for a new leader, and they felt that I could add value there. And so, really terrific experience at MilliporeSigma. I'm looking forward to joining Waters, a pioneer in liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry. And as much as MilliporeSigma was trying to focus on producing vaccines, producing treatments, Waters spends time going deeper into the molecular side and trying to understand interactions between molecules and predict the structural relationships as a consequence. So it's a dive deeper into the microscope, but they are a continuum in the industry in any case. So I'm really excited to join Waters.
Wow, that sounds really exciting. And so I think it's very interesting to see that you have this opportunity, because they couldn't have picked a better person. You have such a deep understanding of engineering, and I know you have a PhD in chemical engineering. So I think so. How important is that for a CEO to have that deep an understanding? Well, I know that you had also worked at McKinsey and got the business skills. So is that important as you are leading a corporation?
So firstly, I think you do too much. You talk too much about my depth of understanding. I understand enough to understand what the scientists are saying. I do believe that leading technology companies, leading scientifically based companies, it does help to have a deep interest in science. And you cannot always do degrees in a certain sequence, so you could have had a different degree. But having a deep interest in science, a deep interest in technology, and having curiosity to build the bridges between the science that you see and the engineering that you produce, it really helps. It had helped me definitely in my pharmaceutical career. It helped me because I had actually used many of these products. To be very precise, I have used a lot of products that Waters produces. I had used a lot of products that Millipore and Sigma produced, and that helps. Having been a customer, having been a user, having seen the challenges that you face in the lab, challenges you face in processing while using that equipment. So you have a lot of empathy for the users.
Mhm.
And I think an added benefit is that a lot of your buddies are now your customers.
Mm.
So before, I mean, so you're not a CEO who doesn't hear from customers. I mean, in fact, I'll share something. When I was appointed as CEO of MilliporeSigma, one of my friends, Sachin, called me and he said, "Hey, Batra, congratulations, you're going to be running Millipore. Great job, but you guys suck." And I said, "Hey, whoa. What do you mean?" He said, "Look, your equipment is not on time now, and I've been waiting for this, and this thing doesn't work. And pretty soon you're very close to a customer. So my buddies, if I don't answer their phone, they call my parents. And so then my mom calls me and says, 'Hey, you aren't answering the phone call from Sachin.' And I said, 'Look, it's for a reason.'" So you're very close to customers. So many added benefits, but the curiosity is the first one and the most important one.
Wonderful. I mean, at these days when there's always a little bit of a, sometimes you hear at leadership levels, challenge for understanding science, I'm always curious about that. And people, I mean, I don't know if there are enough people doing PhDs, the value of that. Everybody is going on to get their MBAs or whatever it is, So, you know, I would just be curious from your perspective, you are supporting research, you are, yourself a researcher, how important it is to encourage, research, and is United States doing enough to do that? Because at the end of the day, I think science is the solution, so yeah,
I tend to agree.
I would love you to hear your views.
I tend to agree. Science is the solution. I would not paint it in extremes. I would not paint the picture in extremes that either this or that. One can learn science as you go on, and there are so many tools. I spend so much time these days just reading and understanding. In this morning, I was just reflecting on Einstein's equations from a century and a half ago, when he talked about time and how people are now making it more useful, making those concepts much more useful. So it's not a question of learning only through degrees, but it's also a question of learning through your life about science and other concepts. But as you, to your question, I think the first thing we have to recognize is during this pandemic, we've had an immense amount of collaboration across different levels in government, federal, state, especially in the United States, local governments, and industry and academia. Right? Everybody's put their heads together. Otherwise, we would not be where we are. I mean, it's unprecedented. The rate of development of vaccines and treatments and tests is unprecedented, especially vaccines and treatments. I mean, to have a vaccine get into the clinic in 60, 70 days from the time you discovered the genome of the virus is unprecedented. And now to have potentially vaccines available for use by the end of this year, about a year and change after the time the virus was discovered, is really, really fast. And that could not have happened if there was not immense collaboration across the different domains. Now, that said, there are challenges, right? And we would have been even in a better situation had we been a bit better prepared. And I think this is the nature of your question. And I see three challenges there and three opportunities on the flip side. Number one, we must spend more time establishing a common understanding of the truth. Right? There are so many people who speculate, right? And I don't need to give you any specific examples, but your smile tells me that you understand what I'm saying. There are so many interpreters. There are one or two people who understand the facts, but there are thousands of people who interpret that and give you the solution. wouldn't it be great to have a common understanding from one or two sets of people like the CDC, the WHO, or authorities that we really trust to tell us what the situation is on the epidemiology, on the treatments, on the vaccines, on the testing, what are the do's and don'ts. And there are many examples. I mean, the use of masks, it was well understood quite in advance that masks were helpful in preventing the spread of COVID-19. However, took a much longer time for the public to understand the value of it, right? And had it been a better had the education been better coordinated, and had we found trusted people who were telling us this information, we would have all worn masks much sooner. And I think that's a very practical example. So the first and the most important piece is we must get behind a common understanding of the truth. The second is investment in infrastructure. I mean, we understood very early on in the pandemic, our infrastructure, especially in the United States, is woefully inadequate, right? Knowing that a pandemic is going to come, right? And I was part of the 2008-2009 H1N1 pandemic and producing vaccines as part of Novartis. And I remember after that pandemic, we dodged a bullet and we said, this, and this needs to happen. Everybody listened at the early on. And then, as politics is, people forgot, funding stopped, and we were not prepared for this pandemic. We knew it was going to come. We've had so many warnings. We knew it was going to come. And investment in infrastructure, investment in hospitals, investment in universities, investments in testing, investment in speed of reaction. And I think now we realize that, and that's the second pillar I would think that we need to invest in. And there is understanding that that investment should take place. I mean, right now we're in the midst of fighting the pandemic, but I hope we have enough time to reflect on these two or three things. And the third is incentives and investment in innovation, not as a reaction, but proactively, right? Asking the question, so what are the pathogens around the globe that we should be thinking about? What is it that we need to do to characterize them? What is it that we need to do to rapidly produce treatments, rapidly produce vaccines, rapidly have testing available, rapidly have surveillance available, creating an innovative system. And there are tons of ideas there on that front. So I think those three really going forward, we need to do better on, right? Common understanding of the truth and the situation, investment in infrastructure, and encouraging innovation well before it is needed, right? So that I think is.
That's really beautiful what you're saying. And so, sometimes people think that all this has to be done at a government level. But it sounds like that's, from what I'm hearing from you, you yourself were very involved in the H1N1 thing. So when you think about the failures, of course, people talk about the failures of the government, but was there failures at other ends that you see in the business, academy? I mean, could people have done better? I mean, you were CEO of a company, were there things you should have thought of doing differently in retrospect?
It's a great question. I think if you break it down on the three again, right, everyone has a role to play, and it's not just the government, right? And you just take about a common understanding of the truth. We when I was at Millipore, we had set up a journal club, and I used to lead it. Every week I would get together with 3 other scientists and we would review the literature. They would read it, I would read it, quantitative, qualitative aspects. And we were doing this as skunk works. We were doing it on the side, and then we would present it to my executive team, and then it would get rolled out. I wish we created a culture of learning in organizations without any outcome.
Yes.
I mean, basic research, basic understanding. And I'm not saying invest in things that make no sense, but at least from an education standpoint, staying current, amplifying the value of staying current. I think that for me, there is a role for any organization to play in that, right? Be it educational institutions, be it government, be it industry, all three, without thinking about the end, because that helped us a lot. When we thought about bringing people back to work, we used that information, we created a model that was looking at epidemiology across the different counties where our sites were, using that information to figure out which sites were hotspots, who do we bring back at what stage, not just relying on government. Remember, I said very often we didn't know who to trust. So we built our own system, built our own model, and I wish we could do that systemically, right? That for me is the first, at least from a company standpoint. The second is infrastructure, right? The demand for certain products went through the roof. right? Could we have thought through innovation on that front to ramp up capacity
Ah,
much faster,
hmm,
right? Could we have built systems, right? So we are learning as we go now, right? Had we understood the value of modular production,
hmm,
and said, okay, a module can be produced and get ready to go to produce X amount of vaccine in 6 months. Can we reduce the time in times of peace to 15 days?
ah,
Would that be great, right? I mean, and that kind of investment in infrastructure is equally important. Investment in data analytics is equally important, so you can collect data and make real-time decisions. And the third one is innovation, right? I mean, without really always thinking about my own product,
yeah.
can I contribute to the system? And we were doing this at an aggregate level, but we could definitely intensify our efforts. And we had done some work with MIT, formed a collaboration with the MIT Media Lab, and created a collaborative where we were looking at better masks, better transmission control, better treatments, better vaccines, and that process is still ongoing. It's publicly available. You can go and look at it. It's called the Pandemic Collab.
Oh, wow. I think we are blessed to be in the Boston area where we can bring these things together, right? And I think that's the
Absolutely.
having MIT and Harvard and everything, in this, it's like the India of ancient times being on the Ganga Kinara where all intellectuals came together. So,
There are a lot of parallels that indeed are right. To bring all the people, to have people congregating together in this location is unbelievable, and we must take advantage of it.
absolutely. Now, I have to ask you, of course, now that you have studied these things during this pandemic, everybody is curious, what does the future hold? And you are, both at the health end and at the economic end. So where do you think, are you comfortable with the way things are opening? I mean, it's both sides are such challenges. And where do you see the future go from,
Yeah,
your crystal ball?
it's a tough one, Ranjini, and there are two different parts to it, right? One part is the scientific development of testing, treatments, vaccines, right? And on that front, as I said already, a lot has been done, and a lot more will be done. We had a great start in production of different types of testing, stops and starts, but now it's on steady state, and the US is testing at a pretty unprecedented pace, both antibody and PCR testing. From a treatment perspective, we've seen some sort of tangents come through, but we're now intensely focused on antivirals like remdesivir, and some steroidals like dexamethasone. But then, if you go deeper, there is convalescent plasma, there are MABs, and these are also being developed. And I have a lot of hope in those because those can then help you prophylactically improve the health of people who might be infected or who are in high risk situations, right? And those are pretty powerful tools. And then lastly, vaccines. There's a lot in the public media around vaccines. A few have gone into phase 3. Over 120 different vaccines are being tested. Well over 20 are in different phases in the clinic. There's been public news on 2 in the United States just getting into phase 3 in large trials. There are others around the world. So I'm optimistic. And it's not just the sheer number, it's different approaches. There are some older approaches that have good platforms, that have good precedent in terms of manufacturing. There are newer platforms like mRNA that are progressing fast. So there is hope, and we are doing our best. So I feel reasonably as comfortable as you can that we are doing the best we can on that front. And the supporting industries are doing the same. The testing industry, the manufacturing industry, everyone is jumping in. On the reopening, I think there is a lot more to be thought through and said. And some states, some localities have done much better, right? The advice from public health officials is rather straightforward. Short of a vaccine or a treatment, please maintain some sort of social distancing. Please maintain barriers if you go into public spaces. So wear a mask. How difficult is that? And we see people not following that in certain parts of the country. I mean, that somehow is irresponsible, right? And it's not just that you're putting yourself at risk, you're putting everybody else at risk. You might not yourself be at risk, and as somebody who's experienced this, you know this firsthand. I mean, young kids can go into different places, they might not get affected, but 50 people around them might get affected. And I think there is a difference in adherence to obvious and simple rules that one can follow. Now, in terms of opening of schools, people who are much more qualified than I are debating this. I'm part of some groups that are trying to figure that out. I think it's going to be a mix. It's going to be a mix of online and in-person learning, depending upon the part of the country you're in. Unfortunately, we have different variants across the country, and as long as we make decisions that are fact-based, prioritizing health of, and this is the same thing with our employees, prioritizing the health of the employees and the students and their families, then looking at the public health good and how we can contribute, and then thinking about business continuity. And in the long, philosophically, in the long run, you know, this might not be as popular. It's okay if you don't have the same intensity of training or education for a few months while we are sorting this out. Mm. It's not the end of the world. You know, we come from a very competitive culture where you're pushing and pushing and pushing. And I'm a product of that too. I went to college when I was 16. I finished my undergraduate before I was 20. And it was an internal push. The society was expecting that you are pushing and pushing and pushing. And in retrospect, I wish I had taken a gap year. I wish I had thought about the world before I did my PhD. I wish I had taken another few years before I went to work. And that would help you grow and mature. So it's, you know, if we take that perspective, it's okay. You know, let's be patient. Let's do the right thing and the vaccines will come. And let's kind of, after this small stop, reflect on how society should be and then move.
Right. But I mean, it's interesting to hear you as a CEO say that, because you put business continuity at the third, you know, you didn't put it at the top. And that was very interesting. I guess if there are no people, the health is not there, you know, everything else is meaningless.
It makes total sense. Thank you for catching it, for picking that up, because it is in that order. Employee and family health, your response to public health, and then business continuity. Because if there are no employees, there's no public health, and if there's no public health, there's no company. it's rather straightforward.
I know, it's such a struggle, and I mean, I don't envy people in your shoes who have to make that judgment, you know, between the economical impact and the health impacts. It must be so tough. And so now you're moving into waters. You know, what are you excited about? Most excited about?
Like, first, excited about taking this break. I don't know when I had it, and spending some time with extended time with family and trying to think through what matters most. As far as the company is concerned, it's a terrific company. It's really a jewel in the life science tools industry. It is a company that is focused on analytical instrumentation. So if you think about the world as what is it, why is it the way it is, and what would you want to do to change it, it focuses in the middle. Why is it the way it is, right? So what is it is the macro environment that you observe. To understand why is it the way it is, you have to go a bit deeper. You have to understand the interactions of molecules, and you have to relate chemistry to structural properties. And that's what Waters does. And I feel blessed that I had the chance to work in the pharmaceutical industry, to look at the implications of what we do, then dig a bit deeper with Millipore and start to make these things and said, okay, this is what helps people. This is how you make it. But to go one level deeper and to ask yourself, why is it the way it is? Why do these molecules interact in this way and produce this result? I mean, to do that, you need analytical instrumentation. And I am really looking forward to learning from such people who have expertise. I know very little about it. I want to just go and suck the knowledge.
I see why they picked you. Your excitement for the actual work that is happening there is just very visible in your speech today. I can only believe that that's what is going to make you very successful. That actually, I should ask you that question. I know you've gone into many companies and just turned them around. What is the secret sauce to that? I mean, at least the numbers, the analytical numbers, show that that your influence has been pretty good. So, what is that secret to that success?
Look, first, it's a lot of luck and having a great family, right? Who puts you in the situation that it does. Having parents who have my parents are both teachers. I mean, who value education, and education is the ultimate equalizer. And I think that if you have that starting point, you're blessed. And having a wife who's highly supportive, you met my wife, highly
Yes.
supportive, and says, you know what, go do this, and I'll take care of this part, and you take care of this part. And having kids who keep you alive all the time, right? I mean, I think that it starts there. And if you have that, then you have a good foundation. um, there is no formula, Ranjani ji, to turnarounds or transformations, at least according to me. I mean, it's very, very simple, right? At the end, you surround yourself with great people who are devoted, who understand, who want the same thing that you want, right? So, common understanding of the direction you want to go in, right? And then you sit those people down and say, let's understand, what is it? What are we looking at? Let's go deep into the facts. Let's go deep into our beliefs. Let's put everything on the table, and we basically discuss it, right? And I've done this 3 or 4 times now, and that works because you bring people who are competent, who understand their subject matter, who are dedicated to the success of the enterprise and of the world, and you put them into the room and say, let's put everything on the table. And you just keep putting everything on the table, and it takes 3 4 weeks to do it. It's a laborious process, and you look at the facts, you look at the products, you look at the customers, you look at the geographies, you look at the technologies, and you educate each other. And something magical happens as you do that, right? You start to develop a common understanding of the situation, what you know, what you don't know, what your beliefs are, what the facts are. And then based on that, you say, okay, now that we know that this is how it is, how do we want it to be? Right? And then you ask yourself, what is the vision, right? Where do we see the world going? And this is where the leader plays the most important role. Because at the end, the leader is the tip of the spear. There's no one on the left, no one on the right. Ultimately, you have to have the courage to make the call to say, do we go here? Do we go here? Do we go backwards? And you do that based on listening, but you reflect a lot on your own. And you say, okay, based on this, what do I see in the world? What does the world need the most? What can we bring to it? And you together then take those 3 4 ideas and say, is this direction good? Is this good? Is this good? And you come up with a future direction. So common understanding of the facts, reflection on where you want to go, and then eventually it's relentless execution, right? So once you've convinced the top team that this is where we want to go, and it's their task then to take everybody there, you then execute. And then it's discipline, it's perseverance, it's all the values that we learned as we grew up. um,
So it sounds like Indian background, Indian training was your heritage, played a big role, your family played a big role. But at the end of the day, it is your hard work and your ability to listen to people, learn from people, and work with them. Sounds like a very, very key thing that you believe was very important. And sounds like you have been lucky to be surrounded by very talented people. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's the last piece is the most important, to be surrounded by people who want the same thing, who are talented, who are focused, and then you just nurture them to say, okay, let's go here or there.
the captain of a great ship. Actually, one of the interesting things I saw in your resume was that you were part of a bioethics panel or led that. I thought that was very interesting. I always wonder if economy and bioethics go together, So I would love to learn from you a little bit about that and why, they had such a panel and what did you contribute to it? And for us to learn a little bit more about what it means in a company.
Let's do it by example, right? I mean, the whole goal of a bioethics panel is to figure out what the boundaries of the use of technology is in a certain context. And technology itself should remain unfettered. So first the principles, and then I'll show you, then I'll talk about an application. Technology itself should be unfettered. Basic research should have only the objective of finding out why the things are the way they are. The application, however, has boundaries. Let's take an example of gene editing, right? And we were very active in gene editing. We had a world-leading patent portfolio in that area. We had established it. We were very aggressive about understanding the science, right? How do you edit genes? How do you edit them specifically? How do you make sure that there are no cross genomic impacts? And so I think there it's unfettered. We made that technology, that understanding available free of cost to researchers around the globe. However, for application, we put boundaries on it. We said, you shall not use our technology to modify gametes or stem cells. So you don't create a new species. And we were monitoring that very, very carefully. So that gives you the boundary of and the type of discussions, types of debates we were having, and the way we would come up with the answers is again surrounding ourselves with experts. So we had bioethicists, we had top biologists, top chemists, top researchers in a panel, and we said, this is what we're discussing, what do you guys think? And we would just listen, and they would debate and say, look, this is a boundary, that's a boundary, and then we would say, okay, based on that, what do we think our company policy should be? Right? And again, it's the same process. Just listen and learn, listen and learn, listen and learn. And then you establish a certain set of principles with smart people and say, these are the principles, do you agree? And then you execute. It's the same sort of logic, but I think it's not a mystery. I mean, the problem statement has to be clear. So bioethics was applied to gene editing. Bioethics can be applied to in vitro fertilization. It can be, and ethical principles have to be applied to data analytics as well. So I think that hopefully gives you a flavor of how, at least in a large company, one could apply such principles.
So it seems like it's at the interface of science versus, our thoughts, our philosophies, and I'm sure that comes into play. I mean, is it good to create a new species or not? How do you make that decision, right? It's not
yeah, and it might happen without you doing anything, right? And who's to say that you're creating a species? It's just a combination of molecules, right? And maybe that would happen on its own. And then I think to assume that you have too much power is also a limitation of common sense.
Thank God. So you don't have to take responsibility if there was a random new species that got created out of some.
I think at the end you must take responsibility for not allowing things to go in a direction that you believe is not consistent with your value system.
Beautiful, beautiful. And speaking of values, I know that despite having such busy life, you still give your time to, to two things that I know of. One is Bal Vihar, which is teaching children about values. I mean, that's a very important thing. And then Ekal Vidyalaya, which is giving back to, 100,000 rural remote villages, bringing education there. Why do you make the time? I mean, you don't have any, and yet you seem to think these are important. So I'd love to know about that. And I don't know about any other interesting activities that you might have out of your business work.
As I said before, I mean, I'm blessed that I have my parents. My parents are both teachers, and the value of learning has been embedded in us, in my family. My wife believes the same. The kids hopefully will believe the same. Today it's difficult to tell what teenagers want. But that said, Bal Vihar or Ekal Vidyalaya or Akshay Patra, or working with the universities that I try to find time to work with, it's a labor of love. It's something that I feel is absolutely critical to give back to the system. And it's again consistent with the philosophy, right? That you try to do good for the world, and as a consequence something good happens for your country, your town, and your family. But you have to start with the with the world itself, with the universe itself. And I think we are blessed to have such opportunities, and I wish and I hope that we can make a difference to a few others who have the opportunities we've had, right? And I grew up in Delhi. Had my parents not worked so hard, had I not lived in a joint family where everybody was supporting each other, I don't think I would have had the opportunities I had I not had the support from the family and from many teachers along the way and many well-wishers along the way. To get the internships that I got were, being a foreign student, I'm sure you're aware, it's not easy to get jobs. I mean, I was a foreign student. It's not easy to get jobs. It's not easy to get scholarships. And there were kind people who were funding students who made certain grades. And I'm so glad that that happened. And so we do something similar in different places, my wife and I, and we consider ourselves very fortunate to be able to do it. So I believe it's a labor of love, and I get something in return out of it. So the best way to learn something is to teach it.
Oh.
Right? I mean, I can give you an example, the Hanuman Chalisa. Hanuman Chalisa, my mom used to recite it. We learned it, as many kids do as they grow up in Delhi in a Hindu family. But I learned about its meaning when I was teaching it at Bal Vihar. Hanuman Chalisa is nothing other than giving you strength. Remember, you used to recite it before tests, before exams, right? Board exam, you're reciting Hanuman Gyan Sagar, and you want to make sure that you're fine. But it's not that you're praying. It's actually it's what you're just simply reminding yourself that you have all the qualities that Hanuman does. Jai Hanuman Gyan Gun Sagar, right?
Right, right, right.
And so all those qualities that are enumerated in the Hanuman Chalisa are only giving you confidence that you have all the strength in yourself to do well in your mathematics exam or English exam or whatever it is that you struggle with. So teaching itself gives you so much back, right? And I find that endearing, and I would love to continue.
That is really fantastic. Thank you for sharing that detail about the Hanuman Chalisa and how it has impacted you. You know, it's amazing. I've talked to a few CEOs, and it's very interesting what they have picked out. I mean, if they were of Hindu origin, you know, what they have picked out from different scriptures, and they kind of hold on to it. And, you know, it seems to guide them during very challenging times. And it seems the case for you as well. So, so
Absolutely.
much to be said about teaching our children these things so that they have these tools at the time of need. I think that's a good thing. And Balvihar, I think, certainly does that. Now, looking into the future, tell us, you know, there is hope. There is, people are so afraid now. Where is the world going? Now, you are in the world of healthcare. You are, you know, also as a CEO, understand the economy. So I'm sure you're going to tell us there's great hope for the future.
I think you took the words out of my mind, words out of my mouth. I'm optimistic. I think the fact that we pulled together in the face of such a pandemic, the fact that we could develop a vaccine in less than a year and get it to people in less than a year, the fact that there are so many treatments that are being developed and they are repurposed, the fact that we are able to support each other. There's so many people who are going out of their way to support each other during these times, and I think that gives me a lot of hope. The fact that we can pull together in the time of need. I think scientifically, so just to break it down a little bit, scientifically, this is a wake up call, right? Let's focus on what matters and not just what is economically driven. And I think that it's a wake up call in that way to list out the fundamental problems and say these are the fundamental problems that we need to challenge ourselves to learn, and to learn them without an end in mind, right? And do basic research to understand how viruses are emerging, how infectious diseases are emerging. Is it a change in the environment? Is it that we're encroaching in areas where we shouldn't be encroaching? What exactly are the root causes? And that will only come if we look at fundamental research. And I have a lot of optimism there, right? That this wake up call will bring us back to basics. I have optimism from an economic standpoint. I think the way especially the federal government has reacted and the state governments have reacted in incentivizing people to stay employed and giving them relief during the times when people have had to be furloughed or people are unemployed is that it reflects a deep understanding of what is required to keep the confidence in the economy alive. And it will also lead, I have two thoughts on that front. One, the contribution and understanding from the economists that are helping lead the country and lead the world, but also at a deeper level, people trying to understand how we should be functioning going forward. What is the most efficient and effective way to function going forward, right? And we talk very often about, well, you know, everything that we used to do face to face can be done digitally. I'm not so sure, right? It's one thing to see Ranjani ji two-dimensional, it's another to see you three-dimensional, right? And there's a lot more you can read emotionally about each other if you're in a three-dimensional structure. So I'm not convinced that you can make everything that was three-dimensional now two-dimensional. Yet you can learn from that. You can say, look, why should I have to travel to Germany every 2 weeks when I can do many of these discussions in a two-dimensional way? For a 1-hour meeting, why should I have to do it? So we obviously challenge certain notions that were highly inefficient, but at the same time, we realize what is important when we don't get exposure to those three-dimensional structures, seeing each other. So I believe that will also allow us economically to figure out what is the most effective way to function, what is the most efficient way to function, the use of data analytics. I mean, in our work, we were making more fact-based decisions now than ever before, because we had data. We won't be able to see each other as much, but we had data, and we used the data to guide us left and right. And I think that has now made us a lot more efficient and proficient in using information that existed otherwise and draw insights out of it. So so I'm optimistic because there is a deeper understanding at a government level on what is needed to get through any sort of economic downturn, but also individually and at a company level, in the private sector, in academia, we are starting to figure out what is the most effective and efficient way after this pause to go forward. So I'm optimistic. I mean, there will be a period of time that we'll have to go through a certain hardship. We are going through it, but I am optimistic that we will come up with better solutions.
That's so fantastic, really, to see that all that happens perhaps happens for good or better, So I think that's the
Matter
motto.
of perspective.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Udit, for giving your time. I think next year we might catch up again. You might be very busy, but on the other hand, who knows? We might get a chance to catch up again, and it'll be really a pleasure and an honor. Look forward to seeing all the great things Udit is going to do in the future. So thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
Namaste.
Thank you very much. Namaskar. Namaskar.